Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abuel Samadin. We're sorry we haven't been here for 2 weeks.
I mean, kinda sorry. No, I do miss it. I miss podcasting, and I hope that everybody misses the episodes. But in the meantime, a bunch of stuff. We're back, and there's just some things that have piled up.
We've got things to say.
We always have things to say.
That's true.
Maybe they're of value this time. But we've been driving cars and stuff too. And Sam, you had two. Well, so if I'm trusting the document here, you had the Cooper S Countryman E, or is that from before?
The plug-in hybrid Mini Countryman.
And did you have the 530E as well?
I did, and that one just went back today.
So you've been sampling BMW's electric wares. Now, I drove both of those cars and really, really liked them. So I'm curious to see what your take on them was.
Okay. Oh, you want me to say it now? Oh.
I mean, you don't have to. We can leave people in suspense.
Yeah. So I had the Countryman Cooper 2018 Mini Countryman Cooper SE.
Yeah, I hate the name.
SE.
The name is dumb.
Their nomenclature is just so ridiculous.
Hey, I hear Johan Denishin's looking for a job. Maybe you can help him out.
Yeah, you can just convert everything to alphanumerics.
Right. It'd be the Cooper. I don't know. You can name it after the voltage. It'd be like the Cooper 220Y.
Yeah, or something like that. Anyway, yes, I this is actually the first time I've ever driven a Countryman. I never got a chance to drive the first generation Countryman. So this is the second generation model that launched a couple of years ago, and the plug-in hybrid version. And I actually, strangely enough, I actually liked it a lot better than I liked the Clubman.
I hate the Clubman.
Yeah, this one, it was roomier. I thought it drove better than the Clubman,
which is a little weird because they are the same. Like they're the same platform, I believe.
I'm not sure they're exactly the same.
Well, yeah, this is BMW, so
yeah, I mean,
they're different.
I think this one is a little bit longer. It's certainly taller.
Yeah.
But dynamically, it felt a lot better. The Clubman oddly felt kind of dead and leaden. And this one
and clumsy.
Yeah, and this one felt more lively.
Yeah.
So it definitely felt more fun to drive. Of course, this is the plug-in hybrid version. It's interesting. The first plug-in BMW vehicle I drove, was almost 10 years ago. The original Mini E, which that one was a battery electric version of the basic Mini hardtop, the 3-door Mini. And it was a pre-production pilot for what eventually led into, it was the first of two pilot stages for what led into the i3. And they used a battery pack and a motor system from AC Propulsion, the same company that devised the system that was in the original Tesla Roadster, that got licensed for the Tesla Roadster. And that one, was such a different experience from this one because this is a plug-in hybrid. That original Mini E was the first electric that I drove that had really strong regen. Mm-hmm. And so you could basically drive it one pedal. You lift your foot off the accelerator pedal, and you could modulate your decel just with that one pedal. This one doesn't do that. Because that original one was front wheel drive, so you had the motor and the power electronics under the hood where the engine would normally go, and the battery was in the back. This one is it's what's known as a P4 architecture. So in terms of hybrids, it basically goes from P0 to P4. P0 is like a mild hybrid belted starter generator system that's driven off the front of the engine, where the electric machine is driven off the engine or drives the engine. A P1 is similar to like the original Honda Insight and the old Civic hybrid, Honda's IMA system, where the electric motor is coupled to the end of the crankshaft. And there's no clutch in there, and then that feeds into the transmission. P2, you put a clutch between the crankshaft and the transmission, so you can actually completely decouple the engine. And P3 is like a power split, like the Toyota hybrid system, where the motors are integrated in the transmission. And then P4 is where the electric machine is completely separate from the rest of the drivetrain. So in this case, and Volvo's plug-in hybrids are the same way. You've got the electric motor at the rear axle, and the internal combustion engine drives the front wheels.
Yeah, that's I've heard it described as the through-the-road hybrid.
Yeah, through-the-road hybrid is another generic term for what's a P4. And the upside of that is mechanically it's fairly simple, because you don't have to integrate the electric machines into the transmission, so you can basically use the same conventional drivetrain that you would use on a non-hybrid version, and then you're just adding a motor at the other axle.
Yeah, it seems really, really elegant. Like, I don't know why we didn't start there.
Well, the downside of it, in this case, is because it's front wheel, the internal combustion drivetrain is driving the front wheels. The electric machine is at the rear axle, and that means that you're limited in how much regenerative braking you can do. Because when you hit the brakes, you get weight transfer off the rear axle, onto the front axle and away from the rear axle. And so you don't get as much weight on the rear wheels, which means you're limited in how much braking you can do. I mean, that's the same reason why on any vehicle, your rear brakes are always smaller than the front brakes, because they're always going to do less work. So that means you can't do as much regenerative braking. So you can get plenty of on-demand all-wheel drive capability, which is nice, but you're not going to get as much regen. So it's not going to help your efficiency as much as it could if it was also at driving the front wheels.
So maybe it's not ideal for something like a Prius, but here in the application for Mini, it seems like a really smart choice, especially because the performance benefits you get. A, you've got all-wheel drive. B, you can engage that rear axle in situations, say, like powering out of a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can use it for front to rear torque vectoring. Yeah. You've got that on-demand all-wheel drive, and you can also, drive it on electricity alone, just driving the rear wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, honestly, I didn't notice any weird sensations despite having it's got two different powertrains in it for, all intents and purposes. And it seemed to be really pretty well thought out. How did you feel? Like, it didn't feel like a prototype to you, I'm assuming? No,
it felt great. I mean, it was, as you said, it was well sorted out. Everything felt refined. There was no funkiness in the way anything engaged or disengaged, things like that you get on some hybrids. It was fun to drive. You had plenty of torque from the rear electric motor. It had about 12 miles of electric driving on a charge. And unlike you, I did plug it in every day. Whenever I came home, I had the cord hanging out under my garage door and just reached around, plugged it in.
This is the difference between you and me, Sam. The only difference: you have a garage. See, and I do not.
Okay. Well, I think there's one or two other differences between us, but we won't go there. So I was able to do a lot of around town driving just on electricity alone without engaging the internal combustion engine, which is the 3-cylinder 1.5 liter turbo that you find in a lot of the smaller BMWs and Minis now. And altogether, it's got plenty of power. I think it's about 220 221 combined horsepower, and 284 foot-pounds of torque, which is more than adequate. So this thing feels pretty sprightly. It feels like what you would expect a Cooper S version of a Mini to drive like. So I had no real complaints about that.
No, I liked it a lot. I thought it felt really, really lively. Like you said, the one area that I thought it sort of gave up its hybrid sort of intentions was like when you're doing like a long on ramp or something, and you just put your foot down and wait for it to gather some speed. It feels like it runs out of breath at a I don't know 65, 70. You can start to feel like as you're doing like a long acceleration with it. It's carrying some extra weight.
as you approach highway speeds, the electric motor is basically running up to its limits at that point, and so you're going to start losing some boost, and you're going to be relying just on the engine alone at that point.
Which has, it's the smaller engine and it has more to pull around. So, that's such a rare instance. Not too many people are going to do that, so it's fine. And even if you do it a lot, you're not. Every time you get on a ramp, it's not most of what you're doing with the car. So I really thought it was a really smartly engineered package and well turned out. And if you can get past all the mini sort of mininess, I thought it was good.
That's what I was going to get to. Is that's kind of still my main complaint. Is just kind of the general, the infotainment system. The big round thing in the middle of the dashboard with the touchscreen in the middle of it. It's not the most intuitive interface in the world, to put it mildly.
Yeah, it's not real good. It's it's not the worst, but it's just
yeah. I've seen better. And I mean, if you like minis, you'll be fine with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's what I come back to is I'm impressed that they managed to stuff that large screen in there. If you have the mini connected XL or HD or whatever the hell they call it.
Yeah, it's a 6.5 inch display in there. It's a nice display. It looks good. It's just not a great UI.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it at that. I mean, we've complained about that in the past, and we don't need to beat that dead horse. Not tonight, anyway.
Well, we have another electric BMW to talk about.
I was going to say the one other complaint I have, is $40,000. It's kind of expensive.
Yes and no though. I didn't think it was that expensive, given that it's essentially a Cooper S, of a different stripe. And you're going to pay that for a Cooper S too, Yeah,
I guess. I guess personally, if I'm gonna spend that much money on a plug-in vehicle, I think I would just as soon go with, just go all in on a battery electric, and get a Chevy Bolt or even a Leaf, for starting at $30,000.
Yeah. So, and I can understand that. The difference is that neither the Bolt or the Leaf are a Mini.
That's true.
And so
they also, neither one of them has the foibles of a Mini in terms of its interface.
Right, they have their own.
Yeah.
But this is a neat place that we're at, right? Where we can debate.
We actually have options.
Yeah. I don't.
And some very good options.
I can't see any problem with picking a Bolt or a Leaf. The Leaf is certainly going to be, well, maybe not. I don't know. I haven't compared dimensions, but in my imagination, the Leaf has a little bit more room and a little bit more cargo space than the Countryman, but that could be wrong.
I think they're pretty close. The Leaf might. I think they're actually pretty close to the same ballpark. One of the things that the Bolt or that the Mini does give you is some options in how you use the powertrain. So you can switch it to electric drive mode. If you're just driving around the city. If you're going to be doing some highway driving, what you can also do is put it in save battery mode. So, essentially it'll run just on the engine, and whatever, if you've got 50% charge in the battery and you want to save that for the end of your trip when you get back in, into town, for the last few miles, you can save that battery and just drive it on the engine. And then when you get down to lower speeds, then you can switch back to either hybrid or electric mode, and, run it emissions free at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty smart. There's a few cars that do that now, and I really like that feature because it lets you select when you're going to use the battery instead of just sort of forcing you into running it all out, which may not be the most effective use of that power. Yeah.
So, then I traded in the Mini for a BMW 530e, iPerformance or xDrive. Again, with the extended nomenclature.
I really liked the 530e.
I did too.
A lot. I don't know why, because I didn't like the regular. I think I had the 528. I think, I forget. I don't know.
530i.
Yeah, their names screw me up now too. But I liked the 530e way more than the gas powered 530.
Yeah, so the 530e has effectively, largely the same powertrain that you find in the other plug-in hybrids from the BMW brand, the mainstream plug-in hybrids. So there's a 3 Series, the 7 Series, and the X5 that are all available as plug-in hybrids. And the only real difference among them, they all use the 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder with 180 horsepower, an 8-speed automatic transmission, and with an electric motor in there. And then the only difference is the 3 Series has a little bit smaller battery, just because of packaging constraints. But they all have the same power output. So you get 111 horsepower electric motor that has 184 foot-pounds of torque, added to 180 horsepower 4-cylinder turbo, and with 255 foot-pounds of torque. And it's a great powertrain. I mean, it's really smooth, really seamless. Unless you've got the display up that tells you where, what the power flow is, it's really almost impossible to tell when the engine comes on or off. And in the cluster, when you're in electric drive mode, it'll show eDrive in the cluster, but this thing has a 9.2 kilowatt hour battery pack. I was getting, regularly 15, 16 miles on a charge with this thing. And over the course of just over a week, averaged 46 miles per gallon with this thing. I had several trips to Detroit and back.
That's such an enormous car.
I know. It's amazing to think of this big luxury sedan, getting 46 miles per gallon. Well, even when I had the 740e, I got 40 with that one.
Okay, that I got confused. I had the 740e, and I was amazed by that car.
Yeah,
because it's huge and it gets ridiculous fuel economy, and it's smooth and it's all around amazing. And it's pretty much basically like a larger version of the 530e. I think.
Yeah, they're both based on the same architecture.
Yeah.
Now, so
I had a 530i, which I didn't like.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now that we're all straight.
Yeah. So this is basically a slightly smaller version of that, and it drives really well. It's a really impressive powertrain. BMW's the lessons that they've learned over the last 10 years. Starting from that Mini E, and they've incorporated that. They went from that to the Active E prototypes that they did in like 2010, 2011, and then brought out the i3 and started adding these plug-in hybrid powertrains to the mainstream, the main BMW lineup. And I think we have 4 plug-in hybrid models available in the US now, not including the i8. So you've got the 5, the 7, the 3 Series, and the X5. And in Europe, there's also a couple of other ones as well. And it's it's just great to drive. I mean, it doesn't have it doesn't have it doesn't feel like you have the traditional BMW sportiness. You still have the issues with the steering feel, of modern BMWs. It's not what it once was. But in terms of, the refinement of the propulsion, if you're looking for something that's roomy, has I think a really good combination of ride quality and handling capability. It's a smooth ride. Never feels floaty, but it also doesn't feel harsh even on the roads around here. And I think it just works really well. And if just all you got to do is plug it in at night and unplug it in the morning, and you're on your way, and you get great energy efficiency. For a lot of your around town driving, you can drive it without any gas. When you step on it, the engine will come on, but you don't really notice it at all, and it just goes, and it's quick, and there's just really not a whole lot to complain about.
Yeah, I think some of that feel like the disconnectedness and the just less than satisfying feel, I think, is just an overall 5 Series thing, not just the hybrid version.
Oh no, you're right. I mean, it's in that respect, it's very similar to the 530i.
Yeah.
And it has similar performance to the 530i.
Yeah, and like all of the reasons why people buy them, like the people who actually buy them, not the people who say that we're going to buy them.
Yeah,
I think it's the right car. But it's a little bit underwhelming, I think, if you remember, like, the E39 certainly, and even the E60 that had a little bit more edge to it in particular trims. And I think, though, what was really impressive was how carefully considered everything felt. Like, it always starts off on the electric motor, like away from the stop. It starts off on the electric motor, and then it kicks on the gas engine because it has start-stop. Not every hybrid does that. Like a lot of cars, you'll take your foot off the gas, it'll kick on, and you've got that thrashiness, and then it has to engage the transmissions. Like, it's just a lot of that stuff I thought was very thoughtfully done, so that it just feels good, even if it doesn't engage you as a driver. It feels like a BMW should in those ways.
Or maybe not necessarily what traditional BMW, I mean, the kind of BMW that made the brand's reputation doesn't necessarily feel like what that should feel like. But if you think of it just more in terms of, I'm spending $70,000 or $75,000 on a car, and on a luxury sedan, and what do I want a luxury sedan at that price point to feel like? I want a level of refinement, and as you said, well thought out. Everything feels really integrated. Everything works well together. And I think that's something that, modern BMWs, whatever you might think of them as sports sedans, anymore, compared to where they were, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that part of it definitely works.
Yeah. Did it really cost that much?
The one I had was 75. Yeah. But it was pretty much loaded up as well. So
yeah, it had the ceramic knobs on the interior and whatever.
Yeah, and, it had some really nice leather on the seats, and heated and cooled seats, and all the fancy stuff, and of course the silly gesture control thing, which I still think is really
like
just yeah. Well, I mean, it works well enough, but it's really just a proof of concept, for the days a few years from now when you don't have to actually drive the car, and the dashboard has been pulled away from you, so it's not really practical to reach out and twist that knob, because if your hand is in the right location to be doing a gesture control to turn turn up the volume, it's also right next to the volume knob that you can just grab and twist and have more precise control.
That's true, but I don't know. It feels a lot cooler to just wave your hand. And I don't know. It makes you feel like you've got the force or something.
Or something.
I thought I was going to hate it, and then I tried it for a few things, and I was like,
I admit it is kind of cool.
Yeah,
but I like physical knobs that I can just twist.
I absolutely agree with you. It's just, and like I said, I was prepared to dislike it. So I was surprised that I actually, shrugged and was like, "Huh, that's kind of neat." It's a parlor trick, but it's a neat parlor trick.
Well, as I said, I think parlor trick, but I think what it is a proof of concept for kind of the next generation of vehicles. When as you start to get into vehicles that are more electric, more automated, and you can start to rethink the interior architecture of the vehicle. I mean, today the dashboard is where it is because you've got a bulkhead right in front of that, and an engine on the other side of that. And when that goes away, and you can start to move those physical pieces around and move that dashboard away from the front occupants. And now you have this enhanced feeling of room inside the cabin. But of course, that means that you can't grab physical controls anymore. So you need an alternative. And so I think, the reason why BMW went ahead and implemented this is to get people used to the idea and, to make sure it works and, learn some lessons from it. And it's not the only way to control. It's a redundant, all the things that you can do with the gestures, you can also do with other controls. So even if there is an issue with it, you still have other means to do the same function. So you'll never lose anything just because of the gestures, but it's there if you want to play around with it and get used to it.
Yeah, they're pretty smart and clever rolling that out just to see how well it's adopted. And when you think about it, like you say, like when you don't have the need for the dashboard or the steering wheel or even that seating orientation, not everybody. People may not be sitting facing forward. They may sit like in a train car on the sides. That's probably a long way off.
Maybe.
But or
maybe not, as we'll discuss later.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see where BMW takes it. But for now, surprisingly, they're doing a really good job on hybrids.
Yeah. No, they're hybrid. Their plug-in hybrid vehicles work really well, and I think they're really well sorted out. And I can't wait to see what comes next.
I mean, I don't know that I'd drop $75,000 on one, but
yeah.
I mean, if you're in the market for a BMW and fuel economy is one of the things that you care about, and you're leasing it anyway,
which most BMW customers do. So
yeah. It's hard not to say that that's an attractive option, even though it kind of sucks the life out of the driver's car thing. A little bit.
But, again, as I said, that's not necessarily all that different from a non-hybrid version of the same car.
Right. So I also had a hybrid that we can discuss. I had the Camry, the 2018 Camry hybrid. I had the XLE trim. I'm not sure I should admit this, but I really liked this car. It doesn't.
You're right. You shouldn't have admitted that.
Yeah, it doesn't really have any bad habits. It's the new TNGA Camry is really good. Every car I've driven on that architecture from Toyota has been solid. They all ride well. Like they finally have somebody who knows how to make them not mushy but also not harsh. So Toyota has figured that out. It's not a sports sedan, but it's not sort of floppy and unpleasant and soft and just vague and crappy like Camrys had been. The XLE trim is nice.
Granted, they've only been that way for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean it's just a short time. So, I was impressed with that. Just like and I will say that the hybrid Camry for at least the last two generations has been the best Camry to drive, which is the weirdest thing. You would think that their sporty SE or the XSE or whatever now is the best one. And I don't know. I haven't driven one of the XSEs or whatever of this generation, so I can't tell you yes or no, but the hybrid still drives really well. And the XLE trim is nice. So they've kind of like they've fixed the things that used to bug me about the Camry. The materials inside are much better than they were on the last couple of generations. So the cabin is nice. And again, that's the XLE trim. So I don't know what the base model looks like. It may feel a little bit more like a rental. I'm sure it does. But
yeah, I haven't sat in a base model. The one I drove a few weeks back, I believe, was also an XSE, if I recall, or maybe it was an SE.
Yeah. So it had like leather stitching on the dash, and just the quality of the plastics is better. The design of the dashboard is better than it had been. They have these, and again, it's a detail thing, like we were talking about with the BMW. So the knobs on the center stack, so to control the radio, the volume knob, the tuning knob, and the climate knobs, they're mushroom shaped slightly. So it's subtle, but when you grab it, it's got a wider radius at the top of the knob than it does sort of down lower on the shaft, I guess, or just the other part of the knob. And to grip it, you don't slip. It's a more positive kind of thing. And it's funny because that same thing happened when one of the mixing console makers, DigiDesign, they introduced a few years ago their D-Control console, and it had mushroom shaped knobs, and everybody's like, "Well, those are a little weird," but to use them is really, it's like a much more friendly tactile experience. So I don't know. It's a little thing. Like, you would think that they wouldn't need to re-engineer something like that, because it's like, the joke about re-engineering the wheel. But it works, and it's effective. So Toyota is thoughtful when they redo their cars to a large degree, and I think they were extra thoughtful on this generation of Camry, and it pays off. It got 45 miles to the gallon, has a big trunk, 2.5 liter to 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, which is pretty well isolated, so it doesn't flop around, and it's not as rough as it used to be. It's what, the 4th generation hybrid Camry? So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's pretty worked out by now.
Yeah, they've got it well sorted out.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that I liked about the Camry is, on a lot of modern cars, on most modern cars now, they've got the hood, up a little bit higher, so there's some clearance under there, and that's part of meeting pedestrian protection requirements, especially in Europe and in other regions where it's not mandated here, but they're implementing the same sort of structure here, and so what. One of the things that happens as a result of that is, the designers often will, you'll have the line from the hood that will extend along the side, and that'll form the bottom of the side glass.
Yeah.
And so you end up with this high belt line feel, and and a lot of modern cars, you end up feeling like you're sitting down low in a tub.
Yeah, get an Infusion, for example.
Right. And one of the nice touches that they did on this Camry is, if you look at the side glass, the line of the side glass from the base of the A-pillar, for the first few inches, it actually angles downwards and then starts to go back up again. So you get that, that little bit of rising wedge towards the back of the car, but it dips down first. So you actually have a more airy feeling inside the cabin, which, I think feels really good, feels really nice.
Yeah. It clears that little bit of visibility in that,
right.
That lower sort of front area, that it's your periphery, but the mirrors are there and stuff. So it does make a difference in making you feel like you're not cooped up. And I got the impression that the cowl itself in the Camry is a little lower, at least, than some of the other cars in the class. It didn't feel as claustrophobic, so I did like that. It felt, it's not like the old days of thin pillars, but it didn't feel as closed in as cars, back maybe 5 years ago or a little bit more felt when they hadn't started using as much high strength steel. Everything had fat pillars in your way. This was a little better than that. So it's hard to admit that a Camry was like one of those things. Like I have nothing bad to say about. Like it's
Yeah, I mean, for years the running joke about the Camry was that if you looked up the word beige in a dictionary, there'd be a picture of a Camry there.
Yeah, but it's not even boring. It's not dull.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting at is, this generation of Camry finally moves beyond that. I mean, they kind of started to do that with the design on the last one.
Yeah.
Made it a little more interesting.
This generation, like, at least in this trim, the SE with the funny the gills in the back and stuff, that's a little much.
The one I had was the XSE, so you get these fake vents in the rear corners and it's maybe a little bit over designed in the front, but the basic shape of the car is really good. They did a really nice job executing this.
Yeah. So now that nobody's listening anymore, it's like
why are these guys talking about the Camry for so long?
Well, but it's Toyota is one of those companies like McDonald's, right? You can take shots at them. And they have such a large footprint in their market that they're going to make missteps from time to time. And when that happens, the key is how they respond. And they're very responsive to criticism. Maybe McDonald's more so than Toyota. But I think in the last few years, Toyota has really taken a lot of the criticism to heart and worked to address it, to make the cars, both good for the intended market and also just good for people who are reviewing and evaluating and just general car enthusiasts, and it's paying off.
And this will probably end up being the last midsize sedan on the market.
You think so?
It wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, midsize sedans are getting clobbered, as we saw with Ford last week, going like, what, we're done.
Yeah, I mean, the car, the small and mid-sized cars are just, they're fading away rapidly. Fiat Chrysler was the first one to dump theirs a couple of years ago. I mean, they were on the leading edge of this. They saw what was coming and they said, "Oh, to hell with it. Let's just dump them now, before we start losing too much more money on them."
Well, I mean, honestly, like that was the move that made you go, are they going to survive or what? And I'm kind of scratching my head. But essentially they didn't want to re-engineer the cars, right? At that point, they didn't want to put money into platforms for sedans or.
Well, I mean, both of those were, they were pretty new. I mean, they were both less than 2 years old when they discontinued them. They were they were brand new cars. They were on a platform that was a few years older than that. Had been on the market in Europe for a few years. It was a Fiat platform. But it wasn't like it was, it wasn't like the LX cars, the rear drive sedans.
Which is crazy that they just keep making those things.
Yeah. I mean, the 200, the Chrysler 200 and the Dodge Dart were still relatively fresh.
Were those compact US wide?
Yes.
So they were basically the compact. So compact US wide that's Renegade, right? And the Compass.
Yeah.
Huh.
And, except that nobody was buying them.
Yeah, well, I mean they were tight. They were not. They were
not entirely competitive in their segments. I mean, they weren't terrible cars. I mean, they were actually quite good in a lot of respects. But in terms of the interior room that they offered, they weren't as competitive as they probably should have been. But they saw the trend starting already, with cars in general, and they decided to get out while the getting was good and repurpose the two plants, to build more trucks and utilities. And now, Ford is doing the same thing. And there's reports that GM is thinking along similar lines, ditching the Spark and the Sonic and possibly even the Malibu. In the next year or two, and I think we're going to see more of these cars, unfortunately, go away. We'll see what Honda and Toyota and Nissan do. I mean, Nissan just had a really rough month, and in what, April? Yeah, April. They reported sales yesterday. Nissan was down 28% overall, but they had, everything was down for them, even their utilities and trucks. But yeah, while we were away last week, Ford made it official that the Fiesta was going away. The Focus, when the new Focus arrives in North America, it'll only be as the Focus Active, which is a slightly taller riding pseudo sort of crossover thing version of the Focus.
And I think it looks cool. It's delightful.
Yeah. And then the Fusion, the Taurus is going away, which I think we all knew for a long time. They just made it official, and
there were a lot of people that
the Fusion will not be getting a redesign.
And that's fine because it's had 3 refreshes.
Yeah, well, the Fusion will be, they'll keep building it for probably another 2 or 3 years, and then it'll eventually probably fade away as well.
Yeah, and I was amused by how many people were surprised that they still make the Taurus. I was like, oh yeah, it's still a thing. Nobody buys them.
Well, they've been selling about 2,000 a month.
They're just, I don't know who's buying. They're not a good car in that segment. Like they're fine. It's not like they're a bad car in terms of problematic, but they're space inefficient. They're big and not even fuel efficient. They're big on the outside, not big enough on the inside. The trunk is not great to load. Like, they're a platform that was sort of like put in this giant taffy pole and stretched out as much as it possibly could. And I don't know, it kind of doesn't work quite as well as it should. And I think honestly what happened was they sacrificed some of the utility at the last redesign from when it was the 500 based Taurus that was a lot roomier. And then they went to this much more stylish Taurus. It lost headroom, it lost, passenger space, and just, it looks a little bit more stylish, but it lost quite a bit of its utility. And I don't know. I think the reason why they sell 2,000 of them is because they're cop cars. Or are they not broken up?
That doesn't include the cop cars.
Oh,
the cop cars, they only sell about 800 a month.
2,000. I wonder if that's the rate of baby.
I think it's mostly
retiring.
fleet and like rental cars, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because it was actually the day they made the announcement, I was in Colorado to drive the F-150 diesel, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes. But I talked to Mike Levine, who's he's in charge of product PR for Ford, and he reiterated that, and if you look at the sales numbers, 80% of Ford's police vehicle sales now are the Explorer, the police interceptor utility. And the Taurus, they'll keep the end of production for the Taurus is next March of 2019. At which point, they will presumably be retooling the Chicago assembly plant where they build the Explorer and the Taurus to build the new Explorer and the Aviator, and the Taurus goes away from the U.S. market. There is actually a new Taurus that's in China only, which is basically a stretched version of the Fusion.
It's not a long wheelbase version of the Taurus.
No. It's a completely different car. It's
Mondeo.
There was at one point a plan to sell that vehicle here as well, but they decided to drop it from North America, and so it's a China only model, and it's basically a larger version of the Fusion.
Ah, see, now that would be a better idea here, because the Fusion, one of the issues is it's a little tight. That's nobody's buying cars, but Ford's going to be fine without the cars. Like, that's the thing. It sounds drastic, but it's not really, and it's not going to bite them at the next fuel crunch. Like you might think they're being stupid, like automakers have in the past, where they're okay. Everybody's buying trucks, and we love the profits, so let's just make all trucks. We don't need to make cars, but they are making cars. Crossovers are made from cars. They're car platforms. They can easily sort of transform them from a higher riding hatchback to a more normal car if that comes back into fashion. They'll be ready.
And the thing is, they don't even need to do that, because going forward, all their vehicles are going to be built on one of 5 flexible platforms. So they've got a front drive unibody, a rear drive unibody, a body on frame truck for the F Series and the Ranger, a commercial van, van platform, for the Transit,
Yep.
and then the EV, a dedicated EV platform. Everything's going to be on those 5, and they're still selling the cars. They're still selling Fiestas and Focuses and Mondeos in other parts of the world. So if the market does shift back, if gas prices continue to increase, and the market does shift back to smaller vehicles or to cars, they can always bring those back to the U.S. market.
Yeah, that's the thing. As long as it's something that they can, sell here in terms of like crash protection and emissions or whatever. But it's a lot. I think it's a less of a big deal to make those changes to an existing car than it is to start from scratch. And Ford has been down both of those roads before. But at the end of the day, they're selling car parts for truck profits with crossovers. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, first of all, one of the advantages they have now that's different from what the situation was 10 years ago or 15 years ago is that all the vehicles that they build now are being designed to meet global crash standards. So they're being designed to meet European standards, North American standards, and Chinese standards. So in the past, 10 years ago, if they wanted to bring a European focus to North America, they had to completely re-engineer the car to do that. When they, from 2010 onwards, everything new that launched in North America was designed from the ground up to meet all of those different standards. So if they decide to bring back, a next generation Mondeo or, Focus or Fiesta back to the U.S. market, basically all they've got to do is update the powertrains, recalibrate the powertrains for U.S. emissions.
Yeah.
And that's less of an issue. And then, there's a few other minor things, but the basic structure is going to be the same. They don't have to completely re-engineer the car. And then, as far as the small car stuff goes, the EcoSport is already outselling the Fiesta and is based on the Fiesta platform. And, Fiesta starting price is like $15,000. The EcoSport starts at $20,000 and goes up from there.
Right.
So
and I guarantee
they're getting
a
lot more margin on those cars than they are on the Fiestas.
There's no way it costs $5,000 more to make that.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Good for them. I mean,
yeah.
It's not a big deal. It seems sort of drastic, but I wasn't really all that tuned in back in, say, like 1980 when everybody downsized like massively. And the 77 GM B bodies went from the massive B bodies of the 70s, like a 76 Caprice is this huge thing, and then 77 is the boxy square, much smaller car that was like 700 pounds lighter. That had to be really drastic as well, and it worked out
eventually.
Yeah,
it took a while.
Yeah, I mean,
and, that was also at the same time that they were implementing emission standards, and electronic controls, engine controls as such were at best primitive.
Yeah,
they were still dealing with carburetors and a rat's nest of vacuum tubes under the hood. And it wasn't for towards the end of the 80s when they really started, when they shifted over to fuel injection and got more sophisticated electronic control systems that they really started to get their act together.
Yeah, I mean, I think back about it now, like GM in particular is in a much better place than they were the last time big changes happened. I mean, they just punched themselves in the face over and over again from like 1972 all the way up to like 1990. Like it started with the Vega, and then there was the V864 didn't work out. There was the X
You could
car.
say that.
You know, I mean, the X car started with such promise, and then it just like that fell flat.
And the J car.
Well, I think the J car actually was popular though, right?
It was a relative commercial success.
Yeah.
It was not a great car.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a great car.
I mean, like a lot of the stuff, there was a lot of interesting ideas poorly executed.
Yeah, it was way better than the Chevette, which was the sort of predecessor.
But I mean, that was such a horribly bad car.
I mean, the Chevette was
it'd be hard not to be.
There was like this old thing they had in Brazil that they were like, we need a small car. Let's bring it here. I'm trying to think. And then they had the HT 4100 V8. Just not good.
Cast iron heads on an aluminum block. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, and then like the GM10, which took forever.
And was way too expensive. And,
right.
And came, they launched all four of those as two-door coupes, just as everybody was saying, no, we don't want two-door, personal luxury coupes anymore. We want four-door sedans and minivans.
And the Oldsmobile diesels.
Oh yes, the Oldsmobile diesel.
And they survived
long before VW screwed up the diesel. GM did it really right.
How amazing is that? Like, they must have had so much money and so much market share. They did. They had 60% of the market back then.
But in 1970, pretty close to that.
They could basically afford to just shoot themselves in the face over and over again and not go bankrupt. It came close, but not go bankrupt. There's no way that could happen now. They would be gone. Things are just so much different. So everybody's getting out in front of it. GM is like you say, I think they may be the next ones to cancel their cars. At least some of them. Because honestly, who's buying Malibus and Impalas?
I mean, the Impala is probably going to be the first one. The Impala, the Sonic, and the Spark will probably go first, and then the Malibu will probably follow behind. It's still selling about 15,000 a month, but it's
not too bad.
Yeah, but it's down a lot from its peak.
I mean, there are some interesting things. Like maybe the interesting stuff sticks around. Buick has the Regals, especially the wagons. Yeah.
But I mean, even those, especially the Tourex, they've transformed that into, one of these pseudo crossovers, like the Focus Active. And they're marketing it as a crossover rather than as a car, or especially not as a station wagon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever they plan to do, I mean, they've convinced us that we all want crossovers, so now they're just all they're going to give us. Because that's how it works. So, yay, all you suggestible people. All right. Let's move on to a couple of other things. One of the things that we also saw last week was that Amazon wants to deliver things to your car, and they're partnering with GM as well. So it's ripe for jokes, but it's also, I think it's a pretty good idea.
No, absolutely. And about 6-9 months ago, Amazon announced their Amazon Key service, which everybody laughed at, as having an electronic, Wi-Fi connected lock on your door, so that when your packages are delivered, instead of having the package left on your porch where anybody walking by can swipe it, the idea would be to let somebody, give them a one-time code to get into your house and, open the door, drop off the package inside, and then close the door and lock it back up again. And it combine that with a camera. I don't know what kind of adoption rate they've gotten on that, but this new thing is, instead of delivering it into your house, delivering it to your car and putting it in the trunk of your car. Which is actually not an entirely new idea. That Audi's actually been piloting this in Europe for a couple of years with a French company called Valtech, where they use the telematics system to, when the delivery person gets there, they can remotely pop the trunk. They put the package in the back of the car, they close the trunk, and then they go on and deliver the next package.
Yeah, and who among us hasn't done that with people, just like friends and acquaintances or whatever anyway? Just like, I'll leave the car open, just drop it in the car, and like we'll catch up later. Like that happens all the time.
Right, and at least this way, it's at least nominally locked.
Yeah.
And they're doing this with GM and with Volvo to start with. Both of whom offer telematic systems. I mean, GM launched OnStar 20 years ago, and one of the original features of OnStar was the ability to remotely lock and unlock your car doors. So if you locked your keys in the car, you could go to a payphone because, of course, back then almost nobody had cell phones, and call up the OnStar operator and give them your number, and they could send a signal that would unlock your car doors. And now they're actually using that for something useful. So that when you're not at your car, if you're at work or whatever, and you want a package delivered, you can have it delivered right to your car. I still kind of like the Amazon lockers, and I don't know have you ever used an Amazon locker?
No.
It's actually a pretty cool idea. They have them in most of the Whole Foods now, and they've got them in other locations as well. Where instead of having a package delivered to your home, they'll take it to a locker, and you can select where you want it delivered. And they will send you an email to your phone with a barcode on there, and you just go to the locker location, scan the barcode, and the door of one of the lockers opens up. And where that's really useful for is when you want to return stuff. If you've got to return something to Amazon, instead of packing it up and taking it to FedEx or the post office or wherever, you can just take it to an Amazon locker. You get the code, you go on the site and you say, I want to return this item. They send you a barcode, you scan it, it'll open up the door, you stick it in there and close it. And then, the delivery people will pick it up from the locker and take it. So it's a lot less hassle. I think, when you're getting stuff, that would be more hassle, a little bit more hassle because you have to go to that location. But if you don't like the idea of somebody having access to the trunk of your car, then that's an alternative. But personally, I think for deliveries, I would be fine with having somebody just drop it in the trunk of my car.
Yeah, I mean,
just don't leave anything valuable in there.
Right. It's like remember the other option is you give them access to your house. So
right, and no way I'm doing that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's like no, you can leave it on the porch. That's fine. It's not a it's not a terrible idea. I like that you don't even need a new car for it either. You can do it with a 2015 and up GM car with this program. So it sounds like it's like a software update to your existing MyLink or whatever, and then it will have that function. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I think, it's just using the OnStar system. So it's any of the newer OnStar equipped vehicles that have 4G LTE radios.
Oh, okay. So do you need to download an app to your phone or do you?
No, you don't even have to do that.
Huh. So does it just it's because if your car was built in 2015 and it has the 4G LTE radio or whatever, but it doesn't is there an OTA update for OnStar that's going to add an icon for this or something? I guess that's where.
No, they can all. You don't even need when you order something from Amazon and you pick the delivery location. So you
basically just select deliver to my car.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's.
When they started adding the lockers, they gave there's now an option for things like the locker, and if you're in one of the areas where they're piloting the delivery to the car, I'm sure that'll be just another option in there. So you have your address, and usually you can have multiple addresses in there if you want it delivered to your work or to your home or wherever, and it'll just be another option. When you get to where do you want it delivered to. You pick that, say, you want, if you have an eligible car, I think you have to register. You probably have to register with OnStar initially to get that, to say, hey, I want to allow this, give them permission to unlock, the car for Amazon. But then once that's been done, then, you just select it, when you're placing your orders on Amazon, and they, the OnStar operator can, they will just send a code to your car that unlocks the trunk, pops the trunk, keeps the other doors locked. And then the way it would work is the delivery person would they would be using an app, so when they get to the car, they'll be at the location, and they'll use the app to request permission to access the car, and then OnStar will send the signal to unlock it, and then they can lock it and go.
That's all fancy alien technology.
Yeah.
Jesus. Or you could go to your local stores and buy things with paper money and coins.
What, and be around other human beings?
Yeah.
Who the hell would want that?
That's the funniest thing. Total side note, like at work in the Slack, with the Facebook nonsense of the conference that's going on now, they introduced their dating app, and I was like, somebody posted a link there, and I was like, oh, Facebook events, going places and doing things.
If I was, yeah, if I was in a life situation where I was looking to meet people, given the current circumstances, the last place I would be doing that is through a Facebook service. Go
where people are. I know people are buried in their phones. Like, anyway, we're going to just sound like a couple of old dads now, so we should just move on.
I mean, well, never mind. I was going to say something, but too much information.
Okay. Let's talk about solid state LiDAR.
Okay. So we've got the first announcement from a mainstream automaker of their intent to use solid state LiDAR in a production automated driving application. BMW has done a deal with an Israeli startup called Innoviz that they've got investment from a bunch of companies, including Aptiv, which is formerly Delphi, and they're going to be putting their solid state LiDAR in BMWs from 2021. Previously, Henrik Fisker announced his intention to use Quanergy's solid-state LiDAR in his new EV from 2020, which, we'll see if that ever becomes a reality.
Does he actually have a car?
They had one at CES.
Yeah. He's going to make a car, and then Bob Lutz is going to put LSV8s in them, and everything's going to be fine.
Well, at this point, he'll probably put LTs in there.
LTs, yeah.
Yeah, put LT4s or LT5s in there.
Either way, it'll be glorious.
But yeah, well, the design of this one, though, won't really lend itself to shoving a big supercharged V8 in there, not like the Karma did.
Yeah, that's true. But, yeah. So all right, so
that's that.
Solid state LiDAR. So a solid state laser. So lasers, I'm not all that up on them, but they have like a little, they have the cell, right, for exciting the electrons. And a typical laser, like what's different with the solid state laser? Does it not have that stuff?
So like the Velodyne sensors, which are the ones, you're probably most used to seeing, the original big ones that look like a, sort of a trapezoidal coffee can that you saw on all the early autonomous vehicle prototypes. And then now they have the newer puck type sensors. They're smaller, looks like a hockey puck. Those are all mechanical scanning LiDARs. So you've got one or more lasers inside this thing, and it scans around, the whole thing rotates, you've got lots of moving parts, and they're susceptible to damage from vibration and things like that. Very sensitive componentry in there. They work really well. They're very sensitive. They very high resolution, but they're also very expensive, and durability is questionable, over the long haul in a vehicle. So what everybody's working towards is these solid state sensors where you don't have any major moving parts. That's the key difference, so you can drive down the cost, and it should be more durable in an automotive environment. And there's a bunch of different approaches to this. Quanergy uses a phased array system that uses a bunch of lenses that splits the laser beam and sends out splits it into a whole bunch of beams that
so like
goes out.
A prism.
Yeah, and then they bounce back, and you get photodetectors in there that read the reflected light pulses. The approach taken by Innoviz is a little bit different. the phased array and the flash lidar that companies like Continental have. The problem with splitting the laser beam is you lose power. If you take one light beam and split it into multiple beams, or put it through a diffuser like flash lidar does, you have a lot less range. And so the Quanergy sensors are good to about 20 or 30 meters right now. They're working on improving that, but it's only, so it's about 60, 70 feet.
Yeah, and you can't just crank up power. Right, like
right. Well, you can, but the problem is, there's most of the lidar sensors out there now are at 905 nanometers. That's the wavelength of the laser.
Yeah.
And so 905 nanometers, if you point a 905 nanometer laser at somebody's eye, it can focus that wavelength. The lens of the eye can focus that, and it can cause damage to your retina. So you have to limit the power output of those lasers so you don't cause eye damage.
Yeah.
So there are some lidar sensors from companies like Luminar that are using 1550 nanometer, which is eye safe. It's what they call eye safe. So it won't damage your eye, but it's more expensive. So you can, because it's eye safe, you can use a more powerful laser and have longer range, but the type of detector that you have to use to detect the reflected pulses is much more expensive. So it increases the cost. What Innoviz is doing is theirs is using a MEMS sensor, a micro electromechanical system for the mirror.
Yeah. So that to me, totally like not reading like how it actually works. It sounds like they've invented like like how you steer the electron beam in a TV, like where they're actually pulling the laser beam, or is that completely off base?
No, well, the electron beam in a TV, you're actually using, you're steering the laser, you're steering the beam, the electron beam, with magnets, right. Basically. Right. This is not, it's not using magnets, because a laser beam, being in the
it's light,
in the infrared spectrum. Yeah, it's not going to be susceptible to magnetic forces, in the same way. So what they're, the MEMS mirror, is basically like a really tiny, like a microscopically tiny mirror. Okay. that scans. So calling it solid state is not entirely accurate. So
there's a moving part. It's moving.
There's a moving part, but it's this tiny little moving part, and it's much more durable than what you find in like most of the lidars that are out there today. So, but because it's not splitting the beam, with the same power of laser, you can get much more range. So you can get about 200 to 250 meters of range with this lidar sensor. So it's better at it works well at higher speeds.
Huh. That's cool. I mean, almost now it sounds like it's just like sort of a DLP projector working backwards.
And it's actually closer to a DLP.
Yeah,
that's actually it's very much like a DLP, but even smaller than a DLP.
Huh. I know this is useless to anybody. I'm just trying to make sense of it.
It's actually pretty cool. The MEMS machines are actually really cool devices. And if you want to look it up, it's pretty interesting how they work. And we're going to see I think we're going to see a lot of interesting applications of MEMS technology in the coming years, but this is going to be one of the first.
So I'm assuming that this drops the price significantly on LiDAR sensors, or it will, if it hasn't yet.
Yeah, they've said, when they're in volume production, their production intent design, the Innoviz One sensor. Right now, they're making a sensor called Innoviz Pro that is designed for development applications, and that's the ones they're selling to companies today for doing R&D work on automated driving. The production one that they're going to sell to BMW is called Innoviz One, and sometime in 2019, they plan to be producing about 5,000 a month. and those sensors in volume should be below $1,000, and they're looking to get down to the low hundreds of dollars per sensor. And just for reference, the latest Velodyne puck sensor, the VLP16 sensor, costs $4,000.
Well, that's going to change the landscape for a lot of things.
Oh, absolutely.
Does that then make autonomous driving that much more practical? Like, does it have performance benefits, or is it strictly just trying to, miniaturize and sort of cost reduce?
It's miniaturizing, and I mean, it'll help in terms of reducing the cost. It should be more durable, and it should be better able to withstand the vibration that, when you hit a pothole and things like that. You don't really want sensitive moving equipment running around, or spinning around at many thousands of times per second, as a current LiDAR sensor does. But you still have the whole issue of whether autonomous driving is actually inherently safer than human drivers, which is the next thing we had here. I've been doing some thinking lately. When you see some of these stats that come out, from companies like Waymo and Tesla, and one of the big ones is probably the single biggest statistic, that is public about automated driving programs is the disengagement reports that are published by the state of California. For companies that want to test on public roads in California, they have to pay $150 for a permit.
Unless you're Uber.
And unless you're Uber, which, well, they eventually did pay the money and got their permit
true.
too. But, and then part of that agreement is that you have to submit an annual report to the California DMV, showing how many, the record of every time the system's disengaged and a human safety driver had to take over. And for the last couple of years, Waymo has been making a big deal about their disengagement, the progress they've been making on frequency of disengagements, or reduced frequency of disengagements, to be more specific. And, on their 2017 report, they got up to an average of 5,600 miles between disengagements. So that means every 5,600 miles of driving, a human safety driver had to take control of the vehicle for whatever reason. And that's not bad. That's well, it's a couple months on the surface. That's not bad, but think about that. That meant that the part of the problem with this metric is it's fundamentally flawed, because it's not really defined anywhere as what counts as a disengagement. Right. And when should a driver when should a human safety driver take over? That's not defined by the regulations.
It's very
by
opaque.
The state.
Everybody's kind of deciding.
Yeah, everybody's got their own procedures and processes. So if you happen to be, testing in a place where there's no other traffic around, and the vehicle starts doing something that may be a little questionable, the driver may use their judgment and say, well, I'm just going to let this go and see where it goes, see if it corrects itself. And so that wouldn't count as a disengagement. In a different environment that, where there's more traffic around, they may take a more conservative approach and say, okay, I'm going to take over here. And that's a problem. But the thing is, Waymo was by far and away the best in terms of their stats for disengagements. But, even that 5,600 miles between disengagements is actually not that good when you start putting it in context of human drivers, because, I pulled up some stats. I did an article for Forbes on this. If in 2015, there were 6.3 million crashes in the United States, but we drove over 3.1 trillion miles.
Right.
That's an average of just shy of 500,000 miles between each crash. And that's total crashes, not fender benders and, fatal crashes and everything in between. So that's like 500,000 miles between accidents, which is actually pretty phenomenally good.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, yes, every traffic death is tragic. I don't want to minimize that, but I think that's what's the spec? It's like one person per every 100 million miles traveled.
Yeah, it's about a little more than 1.1, about 1.15 fatalities for every 100 million miles of driving.
So, yes, autonomous cars are interesting and new. They have a long ass way to go just to get to the safety of the average driver.
Yeah, eventually they'll probably be safer than human drivers. Maybe.
But
But
when?
today we don't actually have any evidence of that. And in fact, what little evidence we do have actually indicates that they're far worse than human drivers.
Yeah.
And to rush this technology into the marketplace, would be potentially tragic.
Yeah, it's going to be. Look, I mean, there's. I'm not going to rant again about how we could just train drivers better and do this stuff at the same time. But that's my idea. It's like,
No, you're right though. I mean, if we did nothing else but just get 100% of people in vehicles wearing seatbelts, 46% of the fatalities of occupant fatalities in crashes were unbelted.
So how many total? It's like 50,000 a year, right? Roughly.
No, the total last year was about a little over 37,000. I think the last year, that we've got full data for in the FARS database, which is the DOT's fatal accident reporting system, is about 24,000. There's about 35,000 total fatalities, and that includes pedestrians, cyclists, vehicle occupants. And so of vehicle occupants, 46% of the people that died that were vehicle occupants were unbelted. So that's, probably, 12,
So that's like
11, 12,000 people right there.
So that's astounding that there's like 12,000 people who won't wear their seatbelt.
Oh, there's way more than that.
No, but I mean,
that's just the number of them that died.
Right. I mean, it seems like such a easy-ish thing to do when you get in the car. Just put the damn seatbelt on. Yeah. And so what does that look like too? Like, okay, autonomous cars, eventually they're going to be different. Everybody's trying to do their lounge seating kind of thing because you don't need to drive it, so you don't need a dashboard and you don't need a steering wheel. You want to sit around, and we're going to make it attractive for people, so we're going to show pictures of them with their friends in the car. Eventually, it's going to be like a rolling little clubhouse or something. So how does that change? Like, how do you make people buckle up in the autonomous world? Because they're going to say, well, the technology is going to be safer, and it may or may not be. But there's going to be that inherent sort of trust in the machines. So right now, are we at a high point for seatbelt use, and are we going to see that fall off? How do you still?
That's one of the big questions. Some of the conferences I go to, one of the big topics in the last year or so has been the user experience in these vehicles. What kind of seating are we going to have in these vehicles? What sort of entertainment systems? How are we going to do restraint systems? If you've got seats that can swivel around, how are we going to handle things like seat belts and airbags? And handle the forces when there is a crash. If you've got a seat that can be at any arbitrary angle. Today, we always know what direction the seat is facing. We know where the passengers are going to be, where the vehicle occupants are going to be. And, when we're doing when the engineers are designing the crash structures, they can target the forces around that, with that knowledge of where they expect the occupants to be. But if the seat can be rotated to any arbitrary angle, now things change pretty dramatically. And so, until you have an environment where there's only autonomous vehicles that we know will never crash, you still have to deal with all these issues of occupant protection, occupant safety, especially if they're coexisting with human driven vehicles, which they almost certainly will be for decades to come. So we don't know the answers yet. They're still trying to figure that out. But the reality is today, for the average driver that goes about 15,000 miles a year, they're going to have about one crash every 32 years.
Huh. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So, your odds of and that's not even a fatal crash. That's just any crash. So your odds of dying in a car are infinitesimally small. The only reason that the total number of people that die is as high as it is because we travel as much as we do. We have so many people going around in cars and buses and other vehicles and walking on the streets and going so many trillions of miles every year. And the amount of vehicle miles traveled in this country has exploded over the last 40 years. In the article I wrote, I went back and looked at the stats, and as recently as 1975, we had 44,525 people die, in traffic accidents in the United States, and that's compared to 37,500 roughly in 2017. But in 1975, we only drove 1.3 trillion miles.
Right.
Last year, we drove over 3.2 trillion miles. So we've gone almost 3 times as far and still have far fewer accidents. So we're actually, driving is actually remarkably safe. The progress we've made in the last 40 years, even though we've had an uptick in the last couple of years, we're still, pretty much near the historical low. And hopefully we'll get better. But right now we don't, the little evidence we have for the autonomous vehicles that are testing on public roads, they fall far short of what humans can do. Humans are actually still much, much better drivers than the software running these autonomous vehicles that are being tested.
Yeah, it's still, the human being is still the least expensive general purpose computer that weighs about 150 pounds and can be mass produced by unskilled labor.
and the human brain only takes about 4 watts of power as opposed to 400 watts for an NVIDIA Drive PX Pegasus.
God, I love those quotes. They're totally not mine. I think I got that mass produced one from Alex Roy. I think it was a NASA thing. But it's true. Like, people are pretty good at driving for now. Even
for all of our flaws, we're remarkably underrated.
Yeah, even Elon said so.
Yeah.
Among the other shit he says.
Speaking of which, on their first quarter conference call today, I guess he berated the analysts on the financial analysts on the call, complaining about the media, telling negative stories about autonomous technology, right, and particularly autopilot, saying people aren't going to trust the technology now. They're not going to use it. Well, the reality is,
you shouldn't.
It's not. Yeah, you shouldn't be using it. It's not any better, and in many cases, it's worse than a human driver. And one of the stats he's been throwing around for the past year was, from the NHTSA report of the 2016 accident that killed Josh Brown. It was stated that after installing autopilot on these vehicles, that Tesla's been saying, the number of crashes went down by 40%. And today, NHTSA actually issued a statement saying, in our examination of autopilot in that crash, we did not actually look at the efficacy of autopilot itself. So they said they did not assess the system's effectiveness in that report. The only thing they actually did was look at the number of airbag deployments before and after. The number of airbag deployments went down by 40%. And so they just wanted to see if there was an increase, and since there was no increase in airbag deployments in those cars, they did not go any further in assessing the effectiveness of the technology. And in fact, the only real data there is out there about any of this stuff is actually from some IHS studies, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. They looked at automatic emergency braking systems, and those are what actually reduced the incidence of crashes by 40%. And you don't need autopilot to do that. They actually have Tesla rolled out automatic emergency braking, at the same time they rolled out autopilot. But there's a lot of very basic cars that also have AEB that have are seeing similar results in terms of reducing front end crashes.
Those are the kind of crashes I see all the time. It's just especially now where people are more distracted by their devices, they are rear-ending each other more often. And also just in certain situations where people are not always fully attentive. So you come over a rise and there's slow traffic, and there's not enough practicing and thinking about, following distance and reaction time going on. So you wind up with those crashes that they're not really serious. They're just, they're common. And if anybody's
they're common and they're costly. I mean, it creates traffic congestion. You often have minor injuries, but there's also a significant economic cost in terms of cleanup, the repair costs for the vehicles. But of course, that also means you're employing people working in body shops, so there is that trade-off. But it's there's a lot we could do to reduce crashes without having to go to full automation.
Yeah, well,
and
if anybody's
right now, there's no evidence that full automation is actually going to make anything better, and may in fact make it worse.
I think it'll make it worse. I mean, the insurance companies are going to figure out what's going on because they're the ones that have to pay for it. And I mean, that's kind of what got us unsafe at any speed was insurance companies going, what is going on here, and looking at Army data, I think, about injuries way back, injuries and deaths way back, where they realized they were losing more guys, in the States on bases than they were, around bases than they were overseas. So like that's I think going to be a pretty good catalyst to sorting some of these issues out. But if you are trusting that autonomous tech, you're by the very nature of that activity, you are not paying as much attention. Your reaction time is going to be so slow because you're not even going to know what's going on. Like now the reaction time is, if you're paying attention, you've still got to register what's going on and move your foot from gas to brake or just whatever. A good reaction time is in the single digit seconds, right? Like 4 seconds at a highway speed is, you want to leave yourself a cushion because it's going to take you 2.5 to figure out what the hell's going on in front of you and then make a reaction to it.
And if you're using something like autopilot or any of these other systems and you're more disengaged, it's going to take you even longer to assess the situation and get back involved in what's going on.
Yeah. So good luck with that.
Yeah. I still say, regardless of Elon Musk's complaints, I still say that Tesla has been reckless in their deployment of autopilot, and they should not be putting beta software out there in customer hands.
Tesla's been doing a lot of stuff. They had their call today, which was entertaining. I know that we had a question on Twitter about that. So we'll get to that shortly.
Yeah.
But the last thing on our topic list was possibly the most exciting. There is a diesel F-150 and you got to drive it.
Yeah, I got to drive it finally. It's like 10 years ago, Ford promised a diesel F-150 and, it was going to be a 4.4 liter V8 diesel. And, we all know what happened in 2008. And so that never made it to production. Although that engine did go into production and it was used in Land Rover and Land Rover models and Range Rovers overseas. It never came to the North American market. But now a relative of that engine, another engine that's also been used by Jaguar Land Rover, is in the F-150. It's a 3 liter V6, 250 horsepower, 440 foot-pounds of torque. You can buy it in F-150s now, and we get to try it out. And I spent some time talking with the marketing guys from Ford. They've made such a big deal, over the last 7 or 8 years, about EcoBoost and how fuel efficient it is and gets you most of the benefit of diesel at lower price. And in fact, the 3.5 liter EcoBoost in the F-150 actually has the highest tow rating of any F-150 model.
Yeah, well, it's got 480 pound-feet of torque too. So.
Right. And so, I mean, you can,
got more than
the top configuration, with the, a 4-wheel drive crew cab, with the 3.5 EcoBoost, you can get up to 13,200 pounds of towing capability and over 3,000 pounds of payload capability.
That's ridiculous.
And the diesel is actually only 11,400 pounds of towing and about 2,000 pounds of payload capability. And so I asked, it's like, why at this point would customers pay the premium for a diesel in the F-150? And what they explained to me was that they found from their studies that about 70% of F-150 owners actually do tow with their trucks, but the vast majority of them only tow a handful of times a year at most. So it might be like towing your boat to the lake in the spring, putting it in the water, and then pulling it out in the fall, maybe towing a trailer a couple times a year for a road trip, something like that. But, they tow, but they don't do it very often. And, one of the things that's been found with the EcoBoost engines, they get decent fuel economy when you're just driving them around. But when you get into them, if you start doing a lot of towing or heavy payload, the fuel economy drops off really fast under load. And one of the reasons they brought out the diesel, one of the great things about diesel is their diesel engines are much less sensitive to the loading conditions. And so if you're towing with a diesel engine, the fuel economy doesn't drop off nearly as much. And so for customers that tow all the time, like, for example, a landscaper that's towing a trailer with a bunch of lawnmowers and other equipment on there, or, some other sort of, contractor, or people that are towing a horse trailer, to competitions every weekend. For those customers, the diesel actually makes a lot more sense. And, based on that logic, it does. And, Ford expects probably about 5% of F-150 customers are going to opt for this diesel engine, which in the two-wheel drive XLT, I think, is rated at 30 miles per gallon highway and 22 city. In the more common ones that they expect to sell in the highest volumes, the 4-wheel drive crew cabs is 25 highway, 20 city, 22 combined, which is pretty impressive for a truck that big.
Yeah. And it'll probably, and like you're saying, it's not going to drop off as much when it's working versus
right. And that's the key, is the drop off when you're really using it the way you're going to use a truck. If you're doing that stuff all the time, then it makes sense to spend, anywhere from $2,400 to $4,000 extra to get the diesel engine.
So where does that put the F-150? I mean, I'm sure that the Platinum gets ridiculous. It's like a $60,000 F-150, if not more, with this engine. But price wise, it's costs a premium for the diesel.
Yeah. So on the for consumers, you can get the diesel on the Lariat trim and up. So Lariat, Platinum, Limited, those are all available with the diesel engine. And depending on which trim level you get it on, it can be as low as a $2,400 premium because it's already got some of the other things that are bundled with it. Like on the Lariat, I think it's $4,000. On the Platinum, it's $2,400, and so that's kind of the range. And then commercial customers, fleet customers, can also order the diesel on an XL or an XLT. 'Cause the work trucks, the more basic trucks, and on there it's a $4,000 option. But again, because of the way they're using it, the high mileage that they tend to put on those trucks, the the improvement in fuel economy more than offsets the cost premium for those customers.
Well, and I was thinking about the price, like your example of a landscaper. That might be kind of an expensive truck for a regular landscaper, but on the other hand, a lot of other trades and stuff, like they drive Raptors a lot. There's a lot of plumbers with Raptors, for example. So not an expensive truck isn't necessarily a barrier for someone who's using it.
And the other thing you find is it's a write-off, but also a lot of times these contractors and landscapers and stuff, they'll be using these trucks for 8-10 years or more. So they will put, several 100,000 miles, or more on these trucks over their useful life. So, when you start adding that up, it starts to make a lot of economic sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just going to be a breathtakingly expensive F-150.
Well, when the average transaction price on an F-Series is already like $54,000.
Oh my goodness! On F-150,
well, that's on F-Series as a whole, so that includes Super Duty.
Oh, okay.
On F-150 alone, I think it's somewhere around $44,000.
That's still, holy crap!
Yeah. Oh. Well, a F-450 Platinum, runs about $100,000 now. It's insane. It's incredible how much people spend on these trucks.
I just remember the first F-150 my father bought was $11,500.
Yeah,
it was an F-150 XL.
Well, this is why the Ranger's coming back. When they dropped the Ranger, they said, well, the cost of building a Ranger is, virtually the same as building an F-150, and it doesn't really get much better fuel economy. So why should customers buy the Ranger when they can get an F-150 that has more capability? Well, now that the price of the F-150 has gone up so much, and the same thing applies to the Rams and the GM trucks and the Tundras and the Titans. They've all gone up. And that's why manufacturers love to sell them, because it helps to offset the cost of subsidizing, the more fuel efficient small vehicles and EVs and stuff. But now they've got some room in their lineup, in terms of pricing, to be able to sell the Ranger at a lower price, more affordable price, and still make money on it.
Yeah, well, good for them.
Good for somebody.
Yeah, I'm still just, I think a Ridgeline is the perfect truck for most of us.
Oh yeah, for most average consumers that want a pickup truck, a Ridgeline is perfectly adequate. Got lots of room in the cab for 5 people, plenty of room and payload in the bed. You've got that lockable trunk in the back of the bed. And still has some decent towing capability, for pulling a couple of jet skis or, small boat, things like that.
I like that truck a lot.
Yeah.
I wish there were more of them, but we'll see. Maybe that will happen. All right. Do we want to do some questions or anything? I know we had the question about...
Sure.
Actually, we had a question about an RX-8, which I thought was entertaining.
Let's see, where did that go?
Twitter's here. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. So from Surtur, is Ford the canary in the coal mine with respect to cars? Will I be forced to, at some point, to drive an SUV, CUV? Currently have a 2010 RX-8, and it feels like the last good car I'll ever own. Well, actually, Fiat Chrysler was the canary in the coal mine when they did this 2 years ago. Ford is following in their path, and but yeah, I think this is going to be the trend we're going to see from other OEMs over the next couple of years, and you may well be forced to drive something that is at least vaguely branded as a utility, but the reality is that it's more just a slightly tall car.
Did we know at the time that Fiat Chrysler was the canary in the coal mine, or did we just think that they're on death's door?
I thought they were. because the general trend towards SUVs was already happening at that point, and it was around that. It was about that, not that far off that time that I had a conversation with Jim Farley, who is currently president of Ford.
Something like
Can't
that.
remember. At the time, he was head of Ford of Europe. He'd been over in Europe for about 9 months as head of Ford of Europe. And, the comment that he made to me at that time was that he was amazed at, how much even the European market was shifting over to crossovers, but it wasn't the kind of, crossover utilities that were kind of modeled after traditional SUVs, that were more truck-like, but it was more new kinds of crossovers, that were, a little bit taller, basically cars like the Toyota CHR today, the Citroen Picasso and Cactus, and a variety of other of these more car-like sort of pseudo utilities.
And you know what? Like, if you don't like the Cactus, you're dead inside. That thing's just neat. And the new Cactus isn't as neat as the old Cactus, but it's And the CHR is the same thing. Like, hate it all you want, but it's at least like an expressive little experiment in vehicleness. I don't know. It's hard to dislike those cars. So,
but we will still have some cars. I mean, they're not all going away.
Yeah.
Ford's keeping the Mustang. The Mustang's not going anywhere. Because they have, one of their 5 flexible platform architectures is a rear wheel drive unibody. You can bet that there's going to be Mustang DNA going into the new Explorer and Aviator and vice versa. So there's going to be a Mustang around for a while to come. And there's going to be other cars. We will still see some cars. We probably won't see another Focus RS in North America for a while, if ever. But we will see. There's still cars like the Civic Type R, and there will be other stuff. So they're not all going to disappear.
For now, I think that RX-8 is probably the last car like that you're gonna own for.
Certainly the last car like an RX-8.
Yeah. And when you get tired of those Apex seals leaking all the oil, LS swaps are really popular there in that car. It works really well. I liked the RX-8.
Yeah.
That's if you're gonna be stuck with a car forever, that's not a bad one.
Yeah. Or you can buy an old Miata.
Yeah.
Or even a new Miata.
And again, the LS swap. I V8s. I don't know. The Miata's fine as it is too. I like the 4-cylinder. All right. Did we want to talk more about Elon Musk's comments, or do we want to leave that till like next week? I know we got a question about that too.
No, I mean I talked about it before, and I don't really feel like saying anything else. I mean, I already called him reckless, so that's sufficient.
And then any insight into?
Because I'm sure by next time, he will have said something else stupid.
Yeah, I know. Give us a week. We'll chew on it a little bit more. I mean, it just happened today, so the transcript is out, and we'll have time to review. And yeah,
and I'll probably have some additional comments on it. I'll be on Tech News Weekly tomorrow. Depending on when this show gets out, it may be before or after Tech News Weekly, but I'll be on there with Megan Maroney and Jason Howell on Twit to talk about this, talk about autonomous vehicle safety some more, and so I'll probably have something else to say about Tesla then.
Okay, so tune in for that.
Yeah.
Let's see. And any insight into performance of Ford's subscription service in California? That feels like something we need to look into a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, they haven't really said how it's doing so far. They have expanded the program, so presumably that's a good sign. Some of the other early subscription services like Cadillac Book, haven't had huge adoption, but that's at least partly because they're expensive. I mean, one of the things about these subscription services is they give you some flexibility in the vehicles that you drive. but there's a pretty big price to pay for that. So, depending on and there's different setups, like, Care by Volvo is more of, sort of a bundled lease program, and, depending on where you live, it might be a good deal for you, because they bundle in service and insurance as part of it. But some of the other programs, if you want the flexibility, you're going to pay a significant cost premium to get it. So we'll see how these work out. But Ford, none of the automakers have really talked in much specifics about how much adoption they're getting.
Yeah, well, and that might be stuff that they're kind of keeping on the down low anyway.
And they're still tweaking the programs, trying to understand how consumers are going to want to use them, and looking at the price elasticity to figure out how much are people going to be willing to pay for this flexibility. So it's all really new still. So we'll see different variations of these programs coming to market, at different price points and things like that. And then we'll start to get a better idea. I think the ones that may actually turn out to be more interesting are the ones that aren't necessarily run by a car company, but companies like Clutch, and there's a couple others that I've talked to, that work with dealer groups to pull together groupings of vehicles, that span multiple brands and give you a larger selection of vehicles to choose from, different vehicle types across different brands, and they can do it at, more price points, so, Clutch, I think, has plans that run from $750 a month up to $1,500 a month or more. And those may turn out to be more appealing to customers.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say about that. I think we should go because it's been a while. So yeah, good. Thanks for listening, and we will catch everybody next time.
All right. See ya.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.